Whenever you needed raw power, reliable offline capability, and the potential to use the full facilities of your computer, nothing has ever come close to a desktop application. And in the past, we had to choose between Mac, Windows, and in some cases, Linux, in terms of having the right desktop application aligned with the operating system. There is this technology called Avalonia, and what it does is it allows you to write top tier desktop applications with raw power and capability on all the major operating systems. And I'm going to show you what I've done with Avalonia. But first, Microsoft Windows Presentation Foundation is Microsoft's desktop software platform for building top tier desktop applications on Microsoft Windows alongside C Sharp or native applications written in C++ for Windows. So, WPF is a platform I've used since 2005, 2006. Those were the years it was introduced. And I've really enjoyed WPF, but as time moved on, I wanted to have a desktop application that ran well on Windows, Mac, as well as Linux. So you use Visual Studio to build WPF applications. And anyone who is accustomed to Visual Studio knows that installing it can take a good while, and updating it, in this case, took me up to an hour because it had to download over 5 gigabytes of data. So I thought I would download my WPF application from GitHub, where I have the latest code hosted, and update it, make a few tweaks, and see if I can get the application to embrace the latest and greatest Microsoft.NET. Microsoft.NET is the platform for building web applications, mobile applications, back-end applications, as well as desktop applications. So I have a GUI project on GitHub in WPF that I have maintained since late 2022, early 2023. And I've really enjoyed the process of building this application for reading RSS feeds and presenting news in a much more streamlined and efficient way. And so I said this would be a great opportunity with new releases of .NET to download the code that I have archived on GitHub and to update it through Visual Studio. And so I did the download, and there are different ways to download code from GitHub. I'm doing it the more user-friendly way, downloading a zip file, but you can also use the command line and do a git clone. So I could not wait for Visual Studio to update. It was taking too long, so I decided to use the command line to do the update of the software application. I needed to update a few packages, make a few tweaks to the software, and then after that was done, go ahead and run it. So this is what the application looks like on Microsoft Windows using first-party Microsoft Windows Presentation Foundation, or WPF. WPF is just over 20 years old as a technology, but it still gets the job done. And in this case, this application is able to pull different feeds from across the internet. Now, the purpose of this project is not only to pull feeds together from the internet, but to also help develop some of the newer techniques in software development. So it's kind of a cultivation project for cultivating my own software development skills, while at the same time providing a production grade software application that leverages my over 20 years of skills in software development, namely with C# and .NET. And so as .NET has evolved, I've evolved with it, and I am, I feel privileged to be able to use these skills to streamline my own personal workflow. And so here I have multiple tabs representing different feeds in which I'm able to get information aggregated across the internet. This is a demo in this case, so nothing extensive and nothing heavy. So what this does is it allows me to explore different aspects of .NET, like I said, but it was limited or is limited to Microsoft Windows. So then enters a technology such as Avalonia. Avalonia allows me to do the same thing I did with Microsoft WPF. And in this case, I'm doing it on Windows with a quad-core Pentium processor with 4 gigabytes of RAM. And so that's not a big deal because when you're using the command line, you seem to have a more efficient way of going through your software applications than if you're using an IDE or a visual tool like Visual Studio, which requires more computer resources in order to make changes to software code. And so instead of going through that process, I just type out the commands that I need or use a script right here on the command line. And it is anywhere from 20 times to 100 times more efficient than using Visual Studio. And this way, I'm able to get in, get out, and get the work done. In this case, I'm actually building the software application in Avalonia. Now, this wasn't just a quick switch from WPF to Avalonia, but um, they're both basically based on the same design. So I'm going to launch this application on this Pentium-based computer, and let's see how long it takes. It didn't take very long, actually. So you'd think on what many would call a slow computer that this application would run slow and that it would launch slowly, but it did not. As you can see, we have great performance because we have a great software design. And with this, I now have the ability to build Windows applications in a way that is far more flexible, and I have much greater range in how I can apply this software, to include running it on a Mac. So I'm able to take the same process that I used to build it for Windows and run the build script on a Mac, and I'm able to obtain, for the first time in my life, a Macintosh application. And so let's go ahead and run this on the Mac, and whoa, lo and behold, it looks exactly the same as it did on Windows. Granted, with more vivid colors, because those Mac Retina displays can be pretty compelling in terms of how they deal with graphics and visuals and that sort of thing. However, the code is the same, and there are no changes here, and we are running the exact same software. There has there has not been a tweak to any line of code at all, nada whatsoever. I literally took the source code and I said, let's build it for the Mac, and here it is running in all its glory in exactly the same way, the exact same logic from my perspective. Of course, Avalonia takes the code that I have written and it translates it behind the scenes to the specifications and requirements for the Mac environment. And in this case, I have designed this application to be offline compatible and to use as much computing power as it can to run spectacularly well. And so I'm very pleased with this, but no discussion of Avalonia would be complete if we didn't mention Linux. Linux is an operating system that is free to download, install on just about any computer, and it gives you the most freedom out of all of the operating systems that are out there. It has tremendous potential that is yet untapped by the majority of people running desktop and laptop computers. Of course, the majority of the world's servers that host Google, Facebook, Amazon, you name it, they all run on Linux. But as a desktop operating system, it is only tapped by about 1% of users out there on actual laptops and desktops, but over 2 billion users in the form of mobile. Here I'm running it on a Linux desktop, and it's the same application as mentioned before. So I will talk more about this in other videos where I touch on Avalonia on Linux, but thank you for watching.